Hello, and welcome to our WriteHive panel on how to handle receiving critiques. Um, this is a critical subject, pun sadly intended. We have two stalwart panelists who are still here and who will make sure that we're able to cover all this, and it'll be all the better because we'll be able to spend that much more time with them. I shall let them present themselves, starting on the order of my screen with MJ.
Sure. Well, hello. I am MJ Kuhn. I am the author of the Tales of Timor duology, starting with, oh, where is it on my screen? There. Among Thieves is the first book in the duology. It's a fantasy heist tale. So 6 thieves team up to steal a magical artifact, but every member of our heist team is planning to screw over the rest of the team and take the loot. So yeah, those books are out now. I also actually just released a writing guide that just came out in April. So Ultimate SFF Story Bible, if you're interested. Ooh, it keeps disappearing. If you're interested in a world building and
Magic.
character building guide. Yeah, right. Here it is. Now it's gone. So yeah, that's who I am. I'm also the co-host of a podcast called SFF Addicts with my dear friend Adrian M. Gibson. So if you are interested in more stuff like this, honestly, where you hear writers talking about things about writing, feel free to check us out.
That's awesome. Liv?
Hi, I'm Liv Macy. I am now doing this on the fly because I expected you to read a bio. um, so I am the author of the Infinites universe. It is a planned 15-book series. They're interconnected standalones. This one right here is the third one that came out in October. I'm currently writing the fourth book. It should be out this year. I also have a podcast of my own that I recently started. It's been a little bit dead in the water because I unfortunately hit the dreaded burnout this year, but it is coming back on. I'm targeting writers and readers, so there's a little bit for everyone. It is called Write to Read, and that's WRITE to read. Available everywhere, of course, and I'm really happy to be here.
Well, I'm very sorry to put you on the spot there, but you did fantastic, so I'm glad I did in a way. I am your moderator for today, J.R.H. Lawless. I do not have a podcast, but I'm very happy to appear on yours and any others. Uh, but what I am is a lawyer by day for my sins and a science fiction fantasy writer. Currently the Always Greener series, which is my current 3-book series with the fourth one in the works. They're currently published. It was longlisted for the Hugo Best Novel. First 2 books were released. And I'm the chair of SIFWA's International Committee, among other things. So, and I participate in a whole bunch of mentorship programs, which is where the link and the very natural segue into our subject comes in, with regard to critiques. So, how would you say, and feel free to jump in whatever order here, there's no, especially, just 2 of you, how do you prepare yourself when you are receiving critiques, whether that's, clicking that dreaded button to start looking at reviews on Amazon or Goodreads or something, or if it's in a more formal setting and you're receiving a critique from part of your writing team. Feel free to jump in,
Who goes
whoever.
first? Okay, I'll go first this time.
Yeah.
How do I prepare myself? That's a tough question because I feel like I actually don't, because I'm constantly, whether it's an editor or when my book releases, I'm constantly looking and I can't wait for the first feedback. And I'm so antsy. I'm checking my emails and I'm checking the Amazon and I'm checking all the reviews and Goodreads and everything every morning. And then it comes. And you're just kind of like, do I open it? Do I read it? So I probably not really good about giving advice here because obviously I don't prepare myself well. I kind of feel that every author learns to grow a 3rd, 5th, 6th, 7th, 10th, 500th skin. And that literally just comes with time. Your first several dozen feedbacks and critiques that are not glowing and perfection is always going to be really hard. And I really don't think there's a whole lot that you can prepare yourself for that besides time.
Yep, that's a very honest and very fair answer. MJ?
Yeah, so when it comes to reviews, I try not to read my reviews at all. That just tends to be kind of my personal approach to it. I always figure reviews are for readers, and by the time the book comes out, um, it's too late.
Yep, and
Right?
hopefully we're busy on something else, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, and that's the other thing. So yeah, first of all, I don't really check my reviews if I am going to, or like, sometimes you want to see the nice ones. You need a little boost. So actually my buddy Adrian, my co-host, and I, we are each other's review guardians. So he just released a book this year. So every day I go on his Goodreads, I check and I screenshot the 5 stars and I send them to him. So he gets to see the nice ones without being tempted to go look and see if there's something that may, be critical. So that's a piece of advice I always have. But also my like perennial advice to writers in any stage where it might not even be criticism, it might be rejections, right? It might be when they're about to go into querying, it might be when they're about to go on submission, or release a book, right? If you're, regardless of what it is, when you're putting your baby into the hands of somebody who may not like it, my advice is just always be working on something else, because then you have a new shiny pretty thing that is your new heart, your new book baby, and the other one you're a little removed from it. You still love it, but it doesn't feel quite so close to you, and it doesn't feel quite as personal when you do get those criticisms or rejections. So I guess that's kind of how I prepare myself too, is just start working on something else before you open yourself up to that criticism.
That is probably the single most life-saving thing to keep in mind throughout these various multiple journeys that we're doing. I suppose, and I'm going to also kind of jump in here because, we only got 2 panelists otherwise, and it's going to be a very short panel. So, self-insert. But no, what I would say, the only thing I would add is what critiques I do receive with the writing team and so on, I just tend to start from a position of gratefulness. I know it sounds a bit cheesy, but just to be grateful that you have somebody, first of all, that you're in a position that you produce something to be critiqued already. Super grateful for that. And then 2, that you're in the extremely lucky position to have people, whether that's, informally, whether it's your critique partners or beta readers, or whether it's something further down the line with an editor, whether it's your agent. I have a great working relationship with my agent, in a large part because he was originally my editor for my first books, including up to this one, at the small press that published me at the time, which unfortunately died due in large part to COVID. And who then since has become an editor at a relatively big agency, an agent at a relatively big agency, and I signed on with him as my second agent. So we have an amazing sort of natural editorial process as part of the agent relationship, and so I'm always extremely grateful for that. As for anybody who obviously is readily willing and cares enough to take the time, whether that's because they're paid for at some level or not, to provide a critique, opportunities which include plug WriteHive has an amazing mentorship program, which I participated in. Lots of other people have as well, providing critiques, providing all sorts of accompaniment, and use resources like that. Back in Pitch Wars back in the day was fantastic for that as well, right? That's sort of where I got my first sort of toes dipped into the writing community. So yeah, gratefulness, I think, is probably another key thing to keep in mind to prepare yourself for receiving critiques and making the most out of them. Which brings, carry on, yeah, for sure.
Oh, I was just gonna say, because I realized I forgot to answer the second half of the question. I just went for reviews where I don't read them. But yeah, when you're preparing, when I've asked for criticism, because I think that's the difference, right? Like there's
Yeah.
a very big difference to me between a review, which is really just a reader sharing with other readers their opinion of the work. To me, that's not a conversation I need to be a part of. But when it is, right, somebody, a beta reader, my agent, somebody that is giving me their time and their effort and their consideration, I love your point about gratefulness, because that's essential, right? You need to come to it with that. And when it's someone you trust and you've asked for their opinion, you value what they think, you're looking for them. Honestly, I would be disappointed if I had a beta reader and they were like, it's great. Right?
Yeah.
Like, I want my betas to look at my work because I sent it to you instead
Yes.
of sending it right to my agent or my editor, because I know it's not great yet,
You got
right?
one job.
Yeah, I want you to tear it up. I want you to, with love, right? Tell me the parts that are good too, but
Right.
tell me the parts that
Yeah.
suck, and then I can fix them. So yeah, I love your point about gratefulness. I think that's so important.
I want to just highlight that you had said that reviews are for readers, because so many
Yeah.
authors take that and get involved when they shouldn't be. And even though I read my reviews because I'm nosy and I just cannot help myself, I also am very firm on that reviews are for readers. They are not for authors ever.
Yep. And
Yeah.
can't agree more. So speaking of which, are there any other tips or words of advice that you could have to readers out there at various stages of their journey, so that critiques especially are taken as positive way as possible and don't have a negative impact, which they obviously can do, on mental health? That's obviously, you know, an eternal struggle for everybody. Any tips, advice?
I mean, I feel like there's probably no real tip that I can give, because every person is different and how they perceive criticism is different. 9 times out of 10, you hear this all the time, especially with new authors, but when you can't be immune to it, is you can never correlate the criticism of your work or the constructive criticism or the feedback as yourself as a writer or as a person. It has zero reflection on you, and that took me a long time. I write plug about strong women who have overcome their own emotional traumas. We all have emotional trauma, and something for myself is like, I'm a perfectionist, and I for years have struggled with getting that feedback and making sure it's not me. It's not me. I'm not aiming it towards me, and that is really hard. And the only way you just kind of got to go through that and figure out a way to protect yourself and make that division.
Excellent points.
Yeah. Yeah, I think some of it is building up that scar tissue, right? It's just being, you do get a little desensitized to it after a while. I would never have thought when I was first beginning my journey and, going through the query trenches for the first time and crying in my closet after every time I got an agent rejection, right? It would never have occurred to me that now, like, my agent will just forward me, publisher rejections, we're on sub right now. And I'll be like, oh,
Yep.
huh, that sucks. And then you just move on with your
Yeah.
day, right? It is something you get desensitized to. But so when I'm getting feedback, right? Like I've submitted to a beta reader, I've submitted to my agent, and she sends me back notes, right? Something like that, where I'm in the throes of the editing process and I'm getting criticism on my work. I go through personally, this is my personal process, which to Liv's point may not work for everybody. So your mileage may vary. But what I generally do is I read through the critiques in full, right? So whether it's an email where, my agent has just thrown a bunch of stuff together, or it's in the Word document in comments and, the beta reader has put them in, or however the feedback is, I read all of it, one sitting, read it all. Then I give myself up to 24 hours of what I like to call butthurt time. And this is my 24 hours where I do not respond to the feedback. I do not begin work on the edit. I do nothing. I let myself feel butthurt. Right?
That's
And
amazing. I'm stealing that. Sorry.
it's healthy because a lot of times the criticism, it does hurt a little bit, right? Like this is something that you've really put your work and effort into, and somebody is pointing out all the things that are wrong with it. Yeah, you've asked them to do that, but still it hurts a little bit. And sometimes I don't need 24 hours. Sometimes I only need 8 hours, right? But I give myself a day. And then when I'm done with my butt hurt time, I go and I read back through the critiques one more time. And every single time I do that, I come to it with new clarity that the reason I felt butthurt is because they're right. Right? Is
Yep.
because they're pointing out holes. It's like they've discovered the stain on my shirt that I was hoping no one would notice, right? Like these are the things that I need to fix, and that's why it hurt to read it. So yeah, that's my personal little tip to help with the mental health, is to like just lean into the hurt. Like it's gonna hurt to read it. It's gonna sting. Don't hold your hand on the stove and try to work on it right away. Don't punch back and respond defensively to the nice soul that just gave you their time and effort, critiquing your work. Just take a minute and sit with your feelings. Wallow for a second if you must. I like to, as an ADHD girly, I like to have some floor time. You lay on the floor and stare at the ceiling for a little bit. And then come back to it when you're ready. And I find that really helps me.
I'm loving the awesome truths that are coming out here. It's fantastic. You guys are amazing. Possibly a couple things I could add. One, um, something I found helped me quite a lot was when I realized sort of exactly what you were saying there, that when critiques come through, the goal isn't to say, oh yes, I need to do exactly the thing you said, exactly the way you said it. That's bound to get your back up, and possibly rightfully so, because that's not the objective. The objective is to understand where the person, or try to at least understand where the person's coming from, what, in that particular part of your work caused a disconnect, caused an issue, and then understand the spirit of it. And then usually you'll realize, yes, obviously that was something I'd been feeling for ages, and it explains all these other things I ended up having to do, which I probably shouldn't have done, because if I'd done this properly, I wouldn't have had to, and I need to rework it. But make it your own. Rework it in your own way to answer the question. A critique, maybe that's it, but down a critique needs to be taken as raising questions, not a prescription for solutions. That's your job as a writer. That'd be the first thing. And second thing, also, at the end of the day, and ideally, that still should be relatively rare, but always needs to be there. There's a little thing called stet, okay? So some people might not know about stet, all right? It's like a little squiggle, like almost like a, cancer awareness thing or something, but it's a little squiggle. And historically, that's what people would do because they couldn't be bothered to write more, to say, no, this stays the same. I'm not changing anything. It's the power of stet. And that the power is always yours. It's always there. However valid a critique, whatever the source, however esteemed or whatever, at the end of the day, it's your book. So if you say, nope, for whatever reason, hopefully a good one, but that power is always there. And once you know that the stead is there, it actually liberates you to be on the first round, which is in my mind the most important, realizing and finding the spirit behind what caused somebody to raise an issue at a certain point in the book.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I love that point because frequently you will get those notes, right? Where someone will be like, this scene, I don't think you need this scene, right? Like this isn't working or whatever. And you'll be sitting there like, what are they talking about? This scene is pivotal. This scene is like, I love this scene. And what really, I mean, yes, one solution could be cutting that scene, but another solution is just, you just didn't set it up properly, right? So it might be they're pointing to a symptom. You need to find the cause.
Yep, exactly.
And sometimes the symptom and the cause are like really closely knit. Sometimes it's 50 pages ago, right, that you missed something. So yeah, but I do love that. I feel so powerful every time I'm like stit for voice. Like
Exactly.
I will not be taking this copy edit. Thank you, but no thank you.
I mean, even the best partner in your writing journey doesn't necessarily understand every single thing that you're trying to do at every point. It is going to happen.
Yeah, that's one of the things that my editor had said before that really kind of resonated with me, was that she had said, that story's in your head. and you know it all. So if I'm missing something, or I don't think that this should be here, whatever, it's because you did not tell me it needed to be there in other ways, is just what MJ was saying. You really have to, you don't have to look at it as this is not supposed to be here, or it's wrong. You just need to maybe work. If it needs to be there, then you need to show why,
Which feeds directly into the next question. How do you determine when something that's been pointed out as a critique is helpful and is something that you need to, make your own and act upon?
Yeah. I mean, I'll jump in.
Yeah, go for it. It's a 50-50,
I'm
right?
like,
So it's okay.
I don't know.
I can flip a coin if you want, but
right? Like, yeah, you. So yeah, for me, I think it's I mean, as unhelpful as this sounds, it's a gut thing. It's a you can feel it, right? Like I can feel it. And that's why I give myself the butthurt time, because I think the initial reaction to criticism, it's a very natural human reaction to it. No matter how good you are, I think I'm great at receiving criticism at this point, because gosh, I better be at this point. I would have died by now in this industry if not, right? We all would. But it's just a natural human response to getting tough feedback on something you've worked really hard on, is to get your hackles up and say, no, 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 no. But you feel it in your gut when it's wrong, right? When you know that something's wrong. And even, to Liv's point, if it's not something that it's that piece that's what's broken, the beta reader or the editor, your agent, whoever it is pointing this out for the exact reason you've asked them to read it. Because they're not you. They're not inside your head. You have everything. You're too close to the situation. You're too close to it. You already know all the answers. You know your characters better than you know yourself, right? So of course you know why they would do thing X, Y, and Z. But if your reader is saying, oh, this action seems really out of character for this guy, your immediate reaction might be to go, what are you even reading this book? Do you even understand this character? I don't think so. But when you take a second and sit with it, then you can go, okay, there must be something. I must not be showing this element to this character. On the flip side though, sometimes, you'll give your book, like I usually have more than one beta reader read my book at the same time, and then, they'll give me feedback hopefully around the same time, and then I go back into edits. I've had times where both beta readers see the exact opposite thing, right? About a scene, about a character, about a thing. One of them thinks this scene is too, I'm doing too much exposition in this scene. The other one thinks that I'm not really doing enough world building in this area. They don't know what's going on. And it's like, who do I trust? Who do I know? And that's usually when generally both of them are right, but just not in the way you'd expect, right? It all goes back to, I love the way you phrased it, Jay, where they're asking a question. It's easy to see. And when I beta read, I do it too, right? I'll write prescriptive stuff in there too, where I'd be like, oh, well, I do this in this scene. I don't expect the writer to listen to me. They can if they want, but ultimately the point that I'm making is I'm raising a question, and that's what they're doing when they're reading my my work as well. And it's your job as the writer to answer that question how you see fit and how you think works best for the work. So yeah, most of the time, the only things I'll really stat are usually like I had one, I was going to say argument. That's really dramatic. I'm a super people pleaser. I would never argue with somebody. But I had one point of discontent, I'll say, with my editors over at Saga Press on this project here, was that there's a scene at the end. I can't really do much without spoiling it, but basically I had put something in there as a clue to something that was going to be a reveal, a couple chapters later. And they wanted me to change the clue. And I was like, no. Right? That's the only time that was actually something more than just like, this character is using improper grammar. And I was like, yes, because I want them to. Those are usually the only things I set, but that was the only like actual plot level thing where I was like, no, I feel strongly I want this to stay. But for the most part, people are usually right.
Yep. Absolutely.
Well, I think definitely it's important that you have to trust the people that you're hearing from. If it's going to be just somebody down the street who happened to pick up whatever and you're getting the feedback, you're not, they may not know what they're talking about or whatever. And ultimately, reading is subjective, right? Like MJ was saying, one reader saying this, the other one saying the exact opposite. I also get more than a handful of beta readers, and ultimately it kind of boils down to the general consensus. If I see something as coming back it's coming up a few times, even really more than once. People are so different, and it is so subjective that they must have a point. Like, so clearly, I missed the mark there somewhere or whatever. But yeah, I definitely think that, if you trust your editor and you trust your beta readers, or you trust that they're just telling you because that's what they see, then it's valid. I know somebody who has had beta readers in settings that I felt like they were not, and she also felt like they were not necessarily true, just because of the way it was presented and stuff like that. So you have to know, you have to be able to go, okay, they're just kind of riding a power trip, or they're being vindictive, or, this is subjective, or, okay, then clearly I'm not stating what I need to state in the previous chapters or whatever. You definitely have to go with your gut. Like MJ says, you have to know. If you don't know and you're asking around, and if it's general consensus, okay, then maybe they are right, or even if you didn't know, but ultimately it has to sit well with you.
This next question feeds directly into what we just said. I mean, is there such a thing as bad faith criticism? And if there is, how would you recognize that and know to treat it for what it is?
I feel like some of that is like one-offs, like if you're just having one person, or like one, maybe, I don't know, I wouldn't even say group, but so like in the example I had given, this was afterwards, it's a company that does it after it's been published and released, or as arcs. And when people are not a part of the writing world, but they're using language that authors use, maybe sometimes it feels like it's fake, because they're using words that they hear all the time. Like something, like people will say, you hear all the time, show, don't tell, right? Like that's like the biggest piece of advice if you Google how to write a book or whatever. And then you hear readers are saying, and then one reader's like, well, they didn't show, they should, they told me, and so they showed me. And you're like, do you know what that means? Because I don't think you're using it the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
Kind of misquoting Princess Bride there, but
Yep.
you just, sometimes it's just, it's just, you got to, know. And a lot of that is just experience. Really, if it's not a gut feeling, it's going to be experience. You're going to make the mistake of taking someone's advice, and then you go to your editor, and your editor's like, what are you doing? No. And you're like, oh, okay, I'm going to not listen to that person again, or, what have you. Experience, I feel like, is really the true.
Yeah.
I've been fortunate in my beta readers. Let me knock on wood really quickly here. I have not had issues with bad faith critiques, like from people I seek criticism from. I have heard horror stories though, right? Like I think a lot of writers do know somebody who's, joined a critique group or a writers group or something, and ended up just, whether the whole group was kind of toxic, or there was that one person who just had a bone to pick with everyone and thought they were God's gift to writing, right? I do feel like a lot of people have those stories. I've been super fortunate in that just I mean, I choose my beta readers very carefully. They're people that I know well, like from the writing community. I've read their work before, and I know that they, their writing jives with my writing. And because there's so many different writing styles, and someone might read my books tend to be very fast-paced. It's been called breakneck before, but like if you're looking for something that's got more pretty prose, and those longer descriptions, and a lot more robust stuff like that, you're not going to find that in my books, because I don't like it. So if someone were to read and that's what they're looking for, they may look at my book and be like, this is so thin on like fantasy stuff, blah blah blah. Which is just, it's not what I'm going for. So you need to find people that are they get what you're trying to do.
love
So yeah, I think I've been really fortunate in finding a group that way. I will say I've seen reviews that are definitely done in bad faith. Whether it's of my book, well, I used to read my reviews. We all did at some point, right? I think that like everybody read their reviews until they broke their own heart, and then a lot of us stopped. Right. And nowadays, like I see reviews, readers sometimes will tag authors in 1-star reviews. I don't know if you guys have had
Yeah,
that. And it's like,
that's
oh, well, thanks for telling me
yes.
right to my internet face that you hate me. And now I can see it for what it is, right? It's just,
Yeah,
it's someone's opinion. Everybody has one.
yeah,
But when you do see those bad faith reviews or something that really just cuts to the bone,
mm,
I have advice that's going to sound petty, but it's not, because I mean it in a very not petty way. And then I'll explain it. What I do when I've gotten something like that is I've gone and I've read 1-star reviews of my favorite books,
yeah.
of books that blew my frickin' mind, books that I read and sat down going, oh, that's it. I should just never write another book because I can never write anything that's good. And I don't do that to cut down that author. I do that to
Yeah,
remind myself that everybody hates everything. Like somebody hates everything.
yeah,
Um, and it's just an opinion. So yeah, if we're talking bad faith reviews, I mean, just don't read them. But if you do read them, do that.
yeah. No, perspective is crucial for sure. I suppose first of all about reviews, I actually quite enjoy reading my reviews. It's a bit of a weird thing to say, of which many sometimes are 1s and 2s, and I also enjoy those. But I suppose it's because for my currently published series, I made the conscious choice to do a bunch of weird shit, including doing these weird etymology humor footnotes, exploring words that I use and how their meaning has often been completely twisted around from the original meaning, and how the words that we use often mean something completely different originally than what we think, and often it's full of innuendo, and it's full of all sorts of stuff in the most innocent friggin' words. So that's not for everybody. I mean, how many, I've had quite a few ones saying, oh, this was interesting, but oh my God, the footnotes, oh, stop, it breaks everything. I can't read it because I'm always pulled out by the footnotes. I mean, sure, sure, you know, I mean, Pratchett did it, right? But
Well, see,
whatever.
for me as a person that loves footnotes, though, if I'm reading that 1-star review, now I'm interested. That's the thing I love about good faith 1-star reviews, right? Like I read, I think it was an Abercrombie, a Joe Abercrombie book, where I read a 1-star review and it was like, there's no good guys in this book. And I was like, oh, sign me up. Right. That's the thing where it's like, that's the thing I always tell new
Yeah, for sure.
authors, right? When they start to get scared of those 1-stars rolling in, it's like a 1-star review can sell your book to the right reader.
Yep.
And it can turn your wrong readers off, right? Like, so my book gets comped, and I have no idea why, but it gets comped to Throne of Glass by Sarah J. Maas all the time. There's no sex in this book. There's no sex in this book. And the SJM readers, they're big into the spice. A lot of them, not all of them, right? And so when I do see 1-star reviews, or have seen them for my book, where it's like, this is nothing like Throne of Glass, I'm almost happy, because then it's like, it's going to turn off those readers that are looking for that, because they're not going to like it anyways, right? So, I think a solid good faith 1-star review is valuable as an author, even if, we don't like to see our star rating trickle down.
Mm. One thing I would add there, and then we can move on potentially, unless you wanted to say anything else, Liv, was that last year there was a panel on facing criticism, which also helps with all these sort of interpretation and sort of maintaining the proper perspective on what's being said, whether it's in a review or critique, and not taking it the wrong way in any hurtful way for you, and using it to build. That was just something I was meant to say at some point, and I'd forgotten.
To add,
Yes.
to what MJ said, the fit is definitely, I didn't even think about that when she said it, but I know people in writing circles who think that, being very blunt about criticism or whatever is a good thing. I don't take that kind of criticism well. If it's like rude or like kind of mean spirited. And so those are people I would never ask to give me feedback, because they do not align with the way I perceive criticism. And that's gotta, you have to prioritize that for your own mental health, that you ask people to give you feedback that take into consideration the way you feel about criticism.
Yeah. And when it comes to bad faith critiques, the other side of it is sometimes you can have people who are in bad faith in how they just in how much effort they put into it, because they clearly haven't put in the effort, and they're just giving you a bunch of copy pasted things that could apply to any book, and you come out of it with not doubts like, oh, did you understand this character? Are you even reading the same book? But did you actually read this book? Because I'm not 100% certain. And so when that's with with critique group or a beta reader, that's one thing. You can handle that a bit more directly. But sometimes if it's with a professional that you're working with, because and maybe not even maliciously, but just because their workload or 1,000 other reasons, then that's something that could be a bit more difficult to handle, and have a bit more heavier consequences. So yeah, that's probably more the only side I've encountered in that respect. Yeah, sorry.
I see the drama like on some of the TikToks where people have offended people or just dislike, and then they go and like bomb their ratings on Goodreads and stuff like that. That's just, I don't think there's any way to handle that well. I've never seen, like, to me or anybody I know, but I've seen it, like I said, on some of like the dramas that have been
Let's all
played and
knock on wood
replayed.
really fast.
Yeah. Well. Yeah.
So when you are asking for critiques, what is the best way to make sure that you get what you need in terms of instructions or at least framework that you provide? What do you ask? What's the best thing to ask for to make sure you get useful critique material?
So what I'll usually do when I send something to a beta reader is I will have things that I feel like are weak points. Because again, when I'm using a beta, it's because I know I've gotten this book right now to the cleanest point I can in this moment, but it's not ready, and I know that I need those outside eyes to tell me what's wrong so that I can find it. But usually I kind of know which of my support beams have the termite damage, right? Like I kind of can tell where the weak spots are a little bit. So I will, point those out where I'll be like, hey, when you're done reading, answer, if you can answer these questions, and it'll be, the character dynamic between these two, or the, how did this plot point land? Things like that. Another piece I always say to my beta readers is, if you can't finish it, if you are bored, if you hate it, if you're starting to read this and you literally can't get through it, do not force yourself to finish reading. Just tell me where you stopped and why. Because that's just as valuable of information. If I have made the beginning so dry that a beta reader who has a vested interest in, finishing it because they're trying to do me a favor is having trouble slogging through it, a reader's never going to slog through it. Or a lot of them won't, right? So that's something I put in there as well. And I think that also just kind of helps beta readers feel a little less pressure, especially if it's a first time beta reader, because most of my betas are other writers, but I do have some folks that I know that are just avid readers in my genre that have never done a beta read before, but I'm like, ooh, you really like my stuff. I like the way you think. Do you want to beta read my project for me? And so if you're asking for the first time, or if you're a newer writer and you don't know how to approach somebody to do a beta read, because it can be scary, you're asking them a big favor. They're going to invest like 10, 15 hours reading your stuff. That's a good way to kind of soften it a little bit, at least from your side and maybe from the reader's side as well. So when they get the request, they're like, okay, well, if I don't have time, or if I really hate it, they're giving me an out. So yeah, I think that helps too a little bit. That's my
Very good point.
I don't know, my little trick.
I agree as well. Communication is so important, obviously, in every relationship that you have in life. It's critical, I think, in writing because of the fact that you are incorporating your mental health and how you take that suggestions and criticisms and the feedback that you're asking for. So your communication needs to be clear about what type of feedback you're requesting, what you're looking for. And yeah, I also ask certain questions like MJ, you kind of know. I mean, I do have some broader questions too, where I'll be like, was there anything that you were confused about? And, kind of like point that out, but usually I'll have something specific in there, like in this scene, how did you envision it happening? Or do you think this was true to the character? Or, because again, I have things that I'm thinking about that may not be may not even be in the version that they're getting. Like I think I knew I wrote it down. I did write it down, but it may have been 2 drafts ago. So there are definitely specific questions and kind of broad questions, but the communication is 100%, like what you're expecting from them and what they're expecting from you is really important, whether it's a beta or your editor or anybody.
Yep, absolutely. Well, just like you both said, it's really important to be clear up front and also not hesitate. And I think it's for any part of the work, really, to give guidelines and say, I'm particularly interested in feedback on this point. I mean, even just recently, I've got my new work in progress. I'm like, whatever, 15,000 words into now, but a few weeks ago when I was only, maybe, about the first 3-4 pages, I was trying to make sure that I had the right balance in terms of humor and sort of caricature, but also solidity of a plot, right? So, and it's a fantasy work progress. So I sent that to my agent who I'd originally workshopped the idea with, and said, you get to read about first few pages and specifically about this. And it was the most useful feedback ever, right? At our next meeting, we went over, and it was really good feedback that validated, answered the things, but also gave me good. It was a bit prescriptive, but that's also positive when it works for ongoing, for future scenes and so on. To make sure watch out there could be a pitfall, to identify that beforehand. Super valuable. So yeah, don't be shy, basically, I guess. Don't be shy when it comes to identifying, which is hard sometimes, but to identify your own feelings about, why you think you might be a bit ambivalent about a certain point or a bit worried about a certain aspect, and then to, in all trust, ask that and show that clearly.
Yeah.
So the last point then, before wrapping it up, how do you process? I suppose we've kind of covered it, but if there are any particular tips, I guess, processing the information that you receive. Shaping it to meet your needs. We talked about that, but in practice, what sort of tips have you found are useful or work for you? We've already talked about it, so maybe there's nothing else to add.
Go ahead, MJ.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know. This is just general editing advice because so much of edits incorporates feedback from others, but sometimes it's feedback from myself, which, like, let's be real, that's the most critical feedback of all.
Of course.
My own criticism. But I do a lot of reverse outlining. I think that's really helpful, especially when you're incorporating feedback. I'm an outliner from the beginning though, right? So what I'll usually do when I go to do an edit is I'll go back to my original outline and I will find the weak points or find the points that have been identified by my beta reader or my editor as a weak point or as somewhere where they had a question. And it just kind of helps me go back and look and see what might be missing or what might be, or I might be doing too much, right? Like I tend to over explain things and not trust my reader in areas as well, right? So it's all sides of the coin. Yeah, so that's one, I don't know, one thing. This is like kind of related, but just a piece I want to put in there just because whatever, when we're giving criticism, because we're writers, most of us, like when we do beta reads, you trade a beta read, right? Like I'll read yours, you read mine, even if it's not at the same time, when I'm giving a beta read, I always make sure to point out the positives and the negatives. Just because it's nice for the writer to get that little confidence boost when they're in their butthurt time. I know how it feels. But also, if you don't point out the good stuff, they may cut that later, right? Like they may not know that it's working really well. And it may end up on the cutting room floor when it's something that was really valuable. So, I didn't know where to put that. So that just goes here
It's
in
a
this
very good point, and I'm glad
comment.
yeah, no, for sure. Very sure. It's super important.
Yes, 100%, because I do think that sometimes the best beta readers are writers themselves, because they know how to boost you as well as truly constructively criticize you, in your work. I think it depends on where you're at in the process. For myself, I think time is a really big tool to have. So after you've written so many drafts, to step away from the story for a while, and then read it through as if you are a reader. I did this on my last book. I am a pantser.
Nothing wrong with that.
You're a magician.
I
I don't know how you do it.
I don't know
Neither do
either.
I. I tried. I failed miserably.
Tried to, yeah.
Give me my beat sheets, man. Give me my beat sheets.
Yeah, I tried to plot it out and outline it, and I get stuck every time. But so this last book that I did, this one right here, actually, I gave it some time, and then when I read it through chapter by chapter, and I actually went to my library, and they have like little meeting rooms, and they have like the whiteboards, and I would read a chapter, and then I'd write like what happened in that chapter that was like key points, kind of. And it showed me some of the plot holes and stuff like that, and showed me the things that I need to ask my beta readers. And so that was really a good way, because then I kind of had a list that I could pit their feedback against, to see like where we aligned a little bit, or where what I was seeing as happening in the chapter was not happening for them. So that was kind of a good tool. I don't even know how I did that, but or why I did that. I just kind of did it, and it was like, oh, I think I'm going to do this every time. It worked really well. So I definitely think that was like probably the biggest tip I could give, is to be able to read your work and have something to compare.
Yeah, that's excellent advice. The point that you put in there, MJ, about also being a good critiquer or beta, I think is extremely valid and extremely relevant, because it's through being a good beta and through being a good critique partner that you learn how to process the information you receive during your own critiques afterwards. You have to, have that perspective again, have that experience on both sides, to be able to, make the most out of this amazing resource that somebody is giving you, to make your book the best it can be. So I think that's extremely relevant.
Well, that's a good point too, because you were saying like, if you can objectively look at somebody else's work and figure out how to nicely say it, or to show them, now right? And like you were saying, if you've gotten criticism back and you're writing somebody else's plot holes or whatever, now you're like, well, so that's what it feels like when my editor's doing it for me. You know what I mean? Like, they are validly pointing out something. I'm not trying to be mean. I'm not trying to hurt them. I'm not telling them that they're a bad person. So that does, if you can be a beta reader, or you can be a critiquer or a feedback person on any level, it absolutely helps you to receive it.
I love that. I was just gonna come in and say the same thing, Liv, because it's whereas I never thought of it so you know what I mean? That
You were there. I think that's probably
way.
part of why you said it, because you knew that and you made that
but
association as well.
when
There you go.
I'm beta reading someone's work, I'm not sitting there going, wow, they're dumb. They're the worst writer I've ever read, right? I'm sitting there going like, wow, this is great, but I'm a little confused here, right? And so when you read someone else's work, it helps you go, oh, that's the energy they're reading mine with.
See, you felt that what you said wasn't, you were just putting it there, didn't have its place, but then I critiqued that, and you realized, so that's exactly what we're talking about.
I love it. So meta.
That's what it's all about, man. Speaking of meta, time for shamelessly plugging things. So I'll do it in the reverse order of my screen. So Liv, this time, if you're okay with starting, where can we find you? What do you have coming out? What do you have already out? And where can people grab it urgently? And anything else you want to point out?
All right. I am on all social media as Liv Macy author. I have a website, of course, livemacy.com. I am at 12 more, wait, I think it'll be 10 by the time this airs, more events for this year for book signing events. I am going cross country, actually, from one coast to the other and down. I'm going all over the place. So of course, come out and meet me. I am working on the 4th book. However, I kind of touched on this. I think I may have touched on this on the previous panel because I was in another panel today, that I did hit burnout this year. Because I published 3 books in a year, and I hit burnout, and I just picked up the pen like a couple weeks ago, and it's May.
Congratulations, that's all I can say
You're
there.
back.
Yes, so I'm finally back. And I am writing the 4th book. It is a 15 planned series. So we are moving forward. It will come out this year. I don't have a time yet. It was supposed to already published.
MJ?
Yeah. So you can find me. I'm also on all the socials. Good little writer bee on all the socials like we need to be now, right? So Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, blah, 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 blah. You can find me at MJ Kuhn Books, all one word. You can also find me at mjkuhn.com. All my links are there. My books, Among Thieves and Thick as Thieves, are out now, and it's a completed duology. So if you want just to binge read something and in a weekend, go for it. Also my journal thing, let's see if I can make it not disappear.
Perfect.
Hey!
That's awesome.
So this just came out.
It looks so cool.
It's like it's oh gosh.
When you can see it.
It's a guided journal. So there are some pages where I have like full like advice and descriptions and stuff, but it's a lot of trackers, it's a lot of templates. It's basically the process that my incredibly detailed plotting self uses when I'm planning my novels. So yeah, mjkuhn.com. You can get all the links to all my books are there. Also, if you like stuff like this, check out my podcast, SFF Addicts Pod, across all socials, and the links are also on my website. So yeah, that's all.
Awesome. Thank you both. I've been your moderator, J.R.H. Lawless, at Space Lawyer. I point here. Only the Zoom can see this. So I don't think WriteHive people can see this, but it's written right here. At spacelawyer.sf. Not .sf, at Space Lawyer SF. Thank you. Yeah, so 3 books currently out. Always Greener, The Root Rebellion, and This is the Good Part, hopefully. And yeah, a few more books in the works, but nothing that has a pub date yet, in the old submission trenches, which is exactly the experience that MJ described. It's all good fun. And due to the magic of time travel, hopefully I'll be able to be in the Discord right now and for the past hour and for the next 20 odd minutes discussing and fielding any questions you guys hopefully have. But I am also, this same weekend that this airs, at some point between June 7th and June 9th, I'm also at the Nebula conference. So, and I'm speaking there, moderating a couple of panels, including a meetup for our international author committee. So yeah, I'll make it work, but yeah, hopefully I'll be there. But if not, I'm also, if you sign up for the Nebula conference, which has an amazing virtual section, you don't have to go to wherever it is this year. It's very, very cool as well. And possibly I think Worldcon as well in August, but anyway. Yeah, it's been a real pleasure critiquing the subject with both of you there today, and hopefully everybody out in WriteHive land have found it a bit of a buzzworthy subject as well, and we'll be able to discuss it with you further right now in the Discord. Thank you so much, MJ. Thank you, Liv, and hope to see you again soon. Specifically right now in the Discord in a few weeks' time.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so
Take
much.
care, everybody.
Bye, guys.